Welcome to the Weekly Report. It's March 19th and I'm Robert Barwick. In today's news, Taming the Rim of Fire. Australia's food security is almost gone and financial time bomb ticking. But first, to the most topical one, Taming the Rim of Fire. If you haven't already seen it, you must watch the new LPAC TV video, The Rim of Fire. It goes for 23 minutes. It's on this website and it's on the LPAC, larouchepac.com website. This is the most important intervention into the post-Japanese earthquake tsunami crisis that has captured the attention of the world. It's killed, as of today, over 7,000 people are confirmed dead. And while the world is running around madly thinking, when I say the world, I mean the media that claims to represent the world, is running around madly trying to turn it into a nuclear crisis, the bigger issue is what is the cause, the real cause of this disaster, and what can we know about it? The LaRouche-Pac video, The Rim of Fire, deals with that. The issue that it addresses fundamentally, and it'll come up in your mind when you're looking at it, is, are human beings really powerless in the face of nature? Now, it's quite clear the British oligarchy wants us to be. Just like throughout history, all oligarchies have wanted us to be, wanted humans to be. And you can even trace that back to the story of Zeus in Greek mythology, where Zeus did not want, he decreed that human beings should not be given the use of fire, so they could stay at the level of ants existing in caves basically. And of course Prometheus defied that to give human beings fire, which is a metaphor for technology, to awaken in them what is their true nature that has allowed human beings to since take charge of their own affairs. But just for those who need to be reminded, I wanted to take this opportunity to read a quote from a book. And this book is called Patriots, Defending Australia's Natural Heritage. And it's by William J. Lynes. Now, William Lynes is a well-known Greenie author. He's the co-author with Mark O'Connor of the Sustainable Population Australia's treatise on Australia being overpopulated that Dick Smith paid for to be distributed all around the country a couple of years ago. In this book, Patriots, he's trying to make out the true patriots of Australia, the Green movement who stop any development in this country. But there's one little section here that's worth reading in the context of what we're discussing. He in this book, which is basically the history of the Green movement in this country, he talks about by the year 1970, Green movements had flourished over the period of say 5 years. All of a sudden they popped up all over the place. So that by 1970, the Australian Conservation Foundation, which Prince Philip set up to create the Green movement in Australia, published a conservation directory which listed over 350 voluntary organisations that made up the conservation movement. And that wasn't even all of them. And Lynes makes the point most of these little movements were less than 5 years old. And then he says this: some groups pursued philosophical and historical questions. Members believed that scientific enterprise caused much of the damage to the planet. Human behaviour had not changed. People's drives and motives remained constant. Increasing knowledge, however, enabled humans to create an arsenal of power entirely without precedent. So that makes it quite clear that the people that William Lynes represents, directly the British royal family who created the movement that he's a scribe for, they see increased human knowledge as the greatest threat, and they want us to see it as the greatest threat and get back into our burrows, basically. So what the Rim of Fire video does is well and truly challenges that. Because the question is, what is real science? Real science is discovering universal principles about how the universe actually works, and our knowledge of those principles allows us to exert some control over the natural processes that the principles govern. That is what is unique about being a human being. That's where our technology and our infrastructure and things come from. So what the Rim of Fire does, it opens up a scientific investigation which raises the possibility that people can actually have power one day over even awesome natural disasters such as earthquakes. For example, we already exert a certain amount of power over it. And Japan is a case in point. We have the ability to engineer against very severe earthquakes. We can build buildings that won't fall down in earthquakes because we know already a little bit about how it works. But this kind of subject that the Rim of Fire opens up is the question of things like the correlation between earthquake events on Earth and solar flares in the sun, from the sun, which have enormous power. And the fact there's a correlation, we don't know the causal relationship yet, but that's what we need to investigate. We may be able to get to the point where, with things like earthquakes and tsunamis, instead of having minutes notice that some of these things are going to happen, we may be able to get to the point of having hours and even days notice that these types of events can happen, which with that kind of warning, imagine the kind of precautions that we could take. Right? That's the kind of thing I mean by taking charge of these processes. That's what humans are able to do. And that's what we should be looking at. Instead of bowing to the media's hysteria that we should turn this into an anti-nuclear issue and actually take a step back from the most effective form of power available to mankind on the planet today. The question we all have to ask ourselves is, do we dare challenge Zeus's decree and Prince Philip's decree that we aren't allowed to? So, like I said, watch that video if you haven't already. Second thing, Australia's food security is almost gone. Now, the agricultural organisation GrowCom has just released a very disturbing report into Australia's food security. What GrowCom highlights is 34% of Australia's fruit and 19% of our vegetables that we consume in Australia is already imported. 34% of fruit, 19% of vegetables. And the imports of those two categories is greater than the exports of those categories. Now, GrowCom points out that the government likes to hide behind export figures and say, Australia is a great food exporter, therefore our food security is sound. What GrowCom points out is that the areas that we tend to export, our exports of food, which are enormous, are concentrated in grains and in meats. So that's great if we just want to eat bread or steak burgers or something, right? Have that as a kind of diet. Maybe we do have food security, but of course you want a balanced diet. And when you look at Australia from the standpoint of a balanced diet, we are very vulnerable in the important areas, the areas that your parents always told you you should eat your fruit and veggies. That's the place that we've become vulnerable. Those are the products, I might point out, that are this kind of thing produced by the Murray-Darling Basin through intensive horticulture with irrigation, right? And they're the things we're already vulnerable in. It's about to get a lot worse. So GrowCom is pointing that out, and this is very important. Now, just to add to this picture though, last week we made a big deal about the one aspect of the assault on Australia's food security, which is the question of the Coles-Woolies milk war against dairy farmers, the price war against dairy farmers. It's a combined assault. And we pointed out that complicit in that, colluding with them, is the ACCC. Well, yesterday something very big happened which adds to our point about this. There's a court case where the ACCC has taken the company Metcash to court to try and stop Metcash from buying Franklin's. Now, Metcash owns things like, or is the company that's the main supplier to independent retailers like IGA and those types of shops. Well, Metcash wants to buy Franklin's in New South Wales, and the ACCC is trying to stop them on the grounds of competition principles. But as of yesterday, their case was thrown into disarray when it was discovered that last year, the chairman of the ACCC, Graham Samuel himself, had a secret meeting with Woolworths which wants to buy Franklin's itself. If Woolworths gets to buy Franklin's, their dominance of Australian grocery retail will just increase out of sight. This is the kind of thing that Samuel should be stopping. Instead, he's holding secret meetings with them and taking minnows like Metcash to court to stop them from doing it. So this was quite a scandal that erupted. We'll have more details of that in the future. But I just wanted to highlight as a follow-on from what we talked about last week. Finally, financial time bomb ticking. Now, on the 16th of March, a couple of days ago, the chairman of the Future Fund, David Murray, who is also the former managing director of the Commonwealth Bank, he made an admission on television that was a big deal. In his language, the way he put it was this. He said Australia's house prices were, quote, uncomfortably high. That's a big deal because of this reason, as we've highlighted in the past on this report. He's the institution that's most in trouble if people accept what he's saying is his own former bank, the Commonwealth Bank. The Commonwealth Bank is the most exposed to Australia's property bubble. Over 65% of its business is mortgages, and the Commonwealth Bank for 6 months has been going around the world hysterically insisting there is no property bubble in Australia. Now their former boss has come out saying that, using that language, right? Because of course everyone knows it is. It's getting harder and harder to deny this bubble, and there's a reason. One of the reasons for that is because it's getting harder and harder to prop it up. The banks are complaining that they're willing to lend money to people, but people aren't as willing to borrow, and consequently credit growth in Australia is dropping. Now, as I've explained in the past here, unless the banks can keep fueling the property bubble by lending more money for people to buy properties at inflated prices, this bubble is going to come down. And when it comes down, it will take all of our banks with it. It'll be such a big explosion, the government won't be able to bail this one out. And everyone involved who wants to be honest actually knows that. So like I said, this is a ticking time bomb, and this will get worse and worse as the year goes by. It underscores what we've said all along. You've got to have a change in the system. The government is in a position now to step in and put in changes that can make sure this coming explosion doesn't obliterate the whole economy. And how do they do that? Homeowners and Bank Protection Bill that the CEC's put forward, and joining LaRouche's call for a global Glass-Steagall to put in those kind of regulations that protect people from these excessive gambling behaviours of banks. So, with that, I'll leave it for this week. Thanks for tuning in, and stay tuned for more updates.